and today I'm just going to get into it because this reading is of my first novel, which was published 2024. What year was it? Wow. What month was it published? July of 2024. The novel, Double Blind, I get probably about a good year and a half of development on that particular universe, the characterization, the different elements that went into it. And so far there are two in the series. There's going to be a third one that's going to go ahead and finish it up. And it was my first fiction novel. I had written nonfiction for a long time and dabbled in fiction. And the first fiction publication, and I was pretty excited about it because I really didn't know which direction it would take. I didn't know, obviously if it would be successful, how much I would like it. And it turns out that people really liked it, so really enjoyed it. So I'm going to go ahead and read from that. And I do not have a copy of the book in front of me, but I will be reading on my Kindle, and you'll be able to see the book. I'm just going to call it copy on screen. So the first part of the book is essentially a synopsis that I did. And wow, my camera is not in focus. It's because I was moving around too much. There we go. Now it's back in focus. It's a synopsis that I did of a particular article that was published in 2017, 2018. And that's where I got the idea for Double Blind and the entire series and universe and everything. The article is about the reanimation of pig brain cells in a laboratory setting. And the study that they did, the experiment that they did was actually very interesting because it brought back pig brain cells to life and made them functional for a short period of time and so on and so forth. And, of course, in my wild brain, I came up with the idea that would translate to the story. So I am not going to read you the synopsis excerpt of that because I'm not going to lie, it could come across as slightly boring, and most of my readers didn't read it. It's probably something that's kind of pivotal to the story, but fortunately, didn't matter. The story was still entertaining. The story was still everything that it needed to be. So I am going to start from the preface, and I will actually conclude with one sentence from the end of the synopsis of the study, which is actually a quote from the study itself. And it goes as, let's see, where did I find? An underappreciated capacity for restoration of microcirculation and molecular and cellular activity after a prolonged postmortem interval, the doctor continued. In some cases, a brain's death may be neither permanent nor irreversible. October 31st, 1991. And this is the fictional story. So some people have asked me, did this really happen? No, this is complete fabrication, a complete work of fiction from my fun little mind. So October 31st, 1991. Colonel David Davez Galvan had been in the operating room at as the physicians attempted to save Colonel Priscilla Talbot's life. She sustained a terrible head wound when a Scud missile had landed on their convoy while hitching a ride several hundred miles from that forward operating base in Kuwait, where the U.S. military had been pushing Iraqi forces out of the country after their invasion. He'd been called before the Army's Medical Review Board to elaborate on the report he drafted several weeks earlier. He sat at a small table next to his counsel, provided to him at the start of the previous week's inquiries. The room wasn't large, and there was only one window, just to the side of the courtroom, between an American flag on one side and an Army flag on the other. There were no witnesses in the stands, only a handful of doctors who'd been overseeing the experiment. Colonel David Galvan, the presiding judge, a white-haired three-star general, began. On behalf of this board, I, General Arias, wish to extend a hand of gratitude for drafting this report so quickly. We know the subject matter and concepts your team have been assigned to are difficult. Thank you for the recognition, Colonel Galvan replied. It required a great deal of work to complete. Now, the court, rather scientists contracted by the court, have noticed some discrepancies in the material you've submitted, the judge began. These discrepancies are specific to elements in this technology, or rather the pursuit of technologies and their intended applications. In short, Colonel, we are confused and need some things clarified. Of course, Your Honor. The first element we need to clarify, the General said, is the identity you are assigning to this project. We have two identities indicated in the multitude of reports and assume this is in relation to the highly classified nature of the project. Yes, sir, Colonel replied. I'm sure you're referring to the name Daviz, which is on several. It's indicated a lot, the General interrupted. This is the name utilized when working with subordinates who don't share the classification designation assigned to those within the experiment. My screen froze. Sorry about that. I see. Now you've indicated how Colonel Priscilla Talbot, whom your scientific colleagues have designated Scylla, died earlier this year and was herself aware of the implications and potential for harvesting these medical techniques, the neuroregenerative actions technology. Yes, Your Honor. She graduated from the Maryland Institute of Technology and specialized in genetic testing and modification. She was involved with the foundations of the initial experiment model and was deeply committed to the project. And it just so happened that she found herself under attack in the midst of a convoy traveling back to our forward operating base in Kuwait. I found myself in that same area, sir, Galvan replied. It was a green zone, but the Iraqi missile barrages were inaccurate. It wasn't uncommon to take fire at these and other locations near primary targets, which were better defended. So you determined the convoy wasn't targeted directly. Even if it had been, a hit wouldn't have been the result of luck more than anything else, Your Honor. We unanimously determined that it was bad aim that doomed the convoy. And it wasn't a direct hit, was it? No, sir. The missile detonated a few meters away, but the blast was significant enough to kill 2 personnel members, including Colonel Talbot. And the judge interjected, she died later in the med ward? Yes, sir, Galvin replied. We did everything to save her, but she had sustained a great deal of damage. Indeed. Now, while in country, you were asked to find individuals who could at some point be good candidates for experiments that would or could benefit from the concept of the new, what is it called? Neural regeneration, Galvin replied. We are learning how to regenerate brain material that was expired or has been destroyed. Now, when you say expired, do you mean it in the same way one would describe death, or does it have a different meaning more suitable for what we're dealing with? There was a brief pause before the colonel finally spoke. Well, Your Honor, he said, it's not as straightforward as it sounds. Can you elaborate? Yes, sir. Clinical death occurs when too many body systems have sustained damage and or are rendered inoperable via a lack of tissue perfusion that results in irreversible cellular breakdown. Expiration is when the body system as a whole is unable to function as normal and is unlikely to return to function without intense medical intervention, by which the chances of recovery become slimmer as time passes. The judge looked him in the eye. And how is Colonel Talbot categorized right now as we speak? She's clinically dead, Your Honor, has been for some time. She's been labeled as expired on nearly every document indicating her present state. Shouldn't there be an update on her status at some point? Is the update to her paperwork delayed for some reason? No, Your Honor, Galvan paused. We were hoping to reinstitute enough brain activity and update her status before clinical death was our only option. Do you think this is achievable? Presently, it's simply not possible, which is why Colonel Talbot's status is listed as clinical death and not something else, which we were hoping for. The judge shifted through several folders before he stopped and continued the questioning. Now, he began, it says you were also present when the colonel was brought into the med ward and her injuries could be attended to. Yes, Your Honor, this is accurate. She began receiving definitive care within 1 hour after the incident occurred. We were close to saving her life, but I had mentioned the injuries sustained were too great. It is tragic. She was a young, educated soldier. The general set aside the file folders. And that is something worrying me. However, the worry could be hyperinflated as I'm not as close to the project as you are. I wonder how a fluke like this comes to pass. Someone works on a project, or an experiment rather, to fix death, and meanwhile is involved in an accident that takes their own life. And does so in a way that ensures their eligibility to benefit from these medical advancements. Do we chalk this up as an incredible coincidence? I do believe it is just that, the colonel replied. Colonel Talbot was passionate about the project because it was something that could help injured soldiers, something that has great potential. Now, like many things in life, beginning with great potential, we must be diligent to ensure what is possible doesn't run away from our better moral nature. There was a pause before the judge continued. While implementing new technologies such as gene modification and regeneration, we must remember so many critical components that are dangerous to forget. One of those is a precious part of our humanity that can't be overlooked. We must remember we are mortal and we are frail. Though we train our soldiers to be capable, the reality is that our enemies possess weaknesses that keep things equal. Man to man, that is. Without natural and critical balances, it's very easy for an unhealthy volume of turbulence to emerge. We could ask the Homo habilis of modern man's lineage, except they were eradicated as our kind emerged. Very true, Your Honor, Galvin said. But But isn't it prudent at... Wow, messed that up. But isn't it prudent as us... Wow. But isn't it prudent of us as scientists to implement new technologies to help others, especially in a time of need? Colonel Talbot's situation places all of us in an advantageous scenario that was not seen in human history. At some point, we may overcome the greatest plague to humanity, untimely death. And who is the person who decides what is untimely death? Popular moral opinion could set a standard that medical science might use as a benchmark. The team and I see this as highly advantageous and with great potential. Colonel Talbot recognized this and knew there was something we could do about it, something that could benefit all of mankind. Similar things might have been said about the ability to create fire, General Aries added. While one man uses it to warm his home, another is hoping to set the world ablaze. We have safeguards for such things, sir. Colonel Galvin almost felt like he was pleading, something he really hated. Well, let's hope the safeguards you're considering will perform well when the risks have become greater and the consequences reach further than your own ass. I surmise your decisions will determine which name gets assigned to an outcome, Galvan or Davis. We'll find out in due time. And then it starts with chapter 1. I think the question is, how many chapters should I be reading? Should I do 2, 3, 4? I don't really know. So that reading is around 11 minutes. And it's just the preface, and I'm already getting all kinds of messages. So I'm going to go ahead and end the reading there. And if you made it this far, I know I messed up a few parts of the reading. If you made it this far, I want to thank you. If you didn't make it this far, hey, I tried. But Double Blind and its sequel, Something Wild, are available on Kindle Unlimited, print, Kindle, e-copy, ebook, all that good stuff. So check it out. It's got 4.5 stars on Amazon. I'm excited about it. And it's got a lot of really good feedback. It's a very entertaining story. It's a thriller, scientific, chills, spills, and a lot of twists and turns. So